People think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're watching GB News. The top story. The chair of the Privileges Committee, Tory MP Sir Bernard Jenkins, could be facing a police investigation into a lockdown party at Conservative Party HQ. Sir Bernard has responded in a statement saying it's not appropriate to comment on a continuing investigation. The Metropolitan Police, though, will reopen their investigation into the so-called Jingle and Mingle lockdown party at Conservative Party HQ on the 8th of December 2020, which Sir Bernard is believed to have attended. 2 COVID regulation breaches allegedly took place during the party. The Prime Minister's refused to say today when he'll fulfil his promise to stop small boats crossing the English Channel. But he's denied the plan is on hold amid legal obstacles stopping the government's plan to process migrants in Rwanda. Being questioned by senior MPs, Rishi Sinak denied there was no plan B if the Supreme Court didn't overturn the ruling blocking the removal of migrants to Rwanda. He says ministers will challenge the appeal court judgment confidently and vigorously. Junior doctors have voted to extend their strike action until at least January 2020. Members of the Hospital Consultants and Specialists Association in England decided to extend their strike action by another 6 months, with 96.5% voting in favour. And that decision comes as junior doctors prepare for a walkout for 5 days from July the 13th to the 18th. The Prime Minister says the strikes are making NHS waiting lists longer.
Already had 500,000 people's care be impacted by industrial action, and I don't think that's right. I think everyone can see the economic context that we're in and the necessity for the government to make responsible decisions.
Well, teachers' unions are calling on the government to release recommendations on pay made by an independent review body. NEU members in England are staging fresh strikes all day on Wednesday and on Friday over their ongoing dispute over pay. All four education unions rejected the government's latest offer of a £1,000 lump sum and 4.5% pay rise. The Prince and Princess of Wales have surprised NHS staff by dropping in for a tea party at a hospital. William and Kate helped lay tables at a reception at St Thomas's Hospital to celebrate the NHS's 75th anniversary. The royal couple met with guests, including Honora Thomas, the first baby born on the NHS, named after NHS founder Aneurin Bevan. It was hosted by NHS Charities Together, which the Prince and Princess are patrons of. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm your host, Simon Evans, and tonight I am joined by a comedian I've often admired, Steve N. Allen, and a comedian I've often worked with, Lewis Schaefer. Now, they're trying to set up some kind of division there immediately. I obviously didn't have any control over that. Now you understand that, gentlemen.
I loved it. No complaints from me.
Fine, wasn't it? Anyway, we're all
I loved it too, because it makes it seem like I worked.
Yeah,
and I worked with you.
You did work with me.
That's a step above what people normally think.
Do you remember the first time we encountered one another? Edinburgh, 1999,
yes,
I think it was.
I do. Oh, my God, I had no idea, and I was so mean to you.
Well, it was understandable. I'd overrun.
We were overrunning.
I'd overrun, and you were having to get on late. That's why you.
Oh,
were
is
cross.
that right?
Yeah.
So I thought we had overrun.
No, you'd overrun. You came in cross, and then somebody said to you, "Lewis, calm down." And the next day, you came in with a conciliatory bottle of wine, and we've been the best of buddies ever since.
Oh my
Until
God.
really quite recently.
At this rate, we'll all get overrun.
So let's have a look at Wednesday's front pages. The Daily Mail kick us off. Boris, Partygate accuser, faces his own police probe. The Guardian have UK ready to drop £11.6 billion pledge for climate fund. The Financial Times have the Bank of England considers forcing foreign banks to replace branches with subsidiaries. Technical issue there. The Daily Express, cheaper food on the way as price war finally hots up. The Mirror, it's time to tell people I have Alzheimer's, from Fiona Phillips. And the Daily Star, I shall say this only once. Allo, allo, caused Brexit. Those were your front pages. And we'll begin with the Daily Mail, Steve.
Yeah, they go with Boris's Partygate accuser faces his own police probe. This is Sir Bernard Jenkins. So it turns out he may have also been at a lockdown busting, I think is the phrase they use.
Busting, yep.
A lockdown busting party himself, although it turns out it was birthday drinks for his wife.
Yeah.
So it's probably not like he wanted to be there. Like, these aren't our friends, they're
It's not a
your
work
friends.
event, though, then, in that case.
No, but it feels like pain. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm sure he didn't enjoy it. But, yeah, this could be rather embarrassing. It could be piled up onto the huge pile of things that people are trying to find to make this this Boris situation.
It's almost like one of these games where you try and make something stick to someone's jacket, but it sticks to your finger and you just can't get it. I mean, it happened to Theresa May after she launched a very eloquent and passionate plea that standards be upheld in the House of Commons. Somebody went, oh, Theresa May, here we are, and trotted it all off. I mean, it's almost pointless, isn't it?
Well, it is pointless, and I got into big trouble over this the last time we reported on this, because I said if they had cared about COVID, they wouldn't have had a party. If people were afraid of death, there's no way you'd have a party, even with your wife. And no, you can't argue with it. Every single one of these people have. You're not going to argue because every single one of these people had parties, which proved to me that they did not think it was a major threat.
Well, I think what it certainly proves they didn't regard it as a major threat to themselves, and I think that is true. But of course, we weren't doing it because it was a threat to themselves. They were doing it because they could become contagion, loci of contagion or whatever, or nodes. But that is still, nevertheless, unacceptable. I would personally be quite happy to now see an amnesty for people who were fined or certainly imprisoned at the time, and we just said, listen, we all overreacted. It was all a bit incoherent.
No. Oh yeah. No, the people who got fined for having a coffee on a bench.
Yeah, I mean ordinary people, not politicians. I mean members of the public.
No,
yeah.
but the politicians and the scientists should be put on trial. Should be a Nuremberg.
Oh, Neil Ferguson should be in the stocks and should have been there ever since he was first caught.
Stocks is not good enough for that guy. that guy is.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, we're off to a good start here. Next up is The Guardian, Lewis.
This is The Guardian, which says that the UK ready to drop $1.6 billion pledge for climate fund. And this is not over a year. This is over 5 years because they had doubled the amount from 5.6 million. And the fact is we're going to need the British people, are going to need every penny to go to reparations. We can't be just giving money away.
But they've said that is true. They've said that. Douglas Murray will save us from that. The UK committed to spend $5.8 billion over the 5 years up to 2021. And then it said this was to be doubled, from 2021. So we're halfway through this span already. I mean, it's slightly incoherent. But what do you think?
I think normally I would be the one saying we should be leading the way when it comes to setting the standards, whereas this is more about the fact that promises were made and then a COVID thing happened. And now we're halfway through the period when we'd have to do that spending. So we'd really have to go hell for leather on the spending. So I understand why the numbers change. You read the article, it's not as if we will now be spending zero. So actually, I think this is more about a numbers change rather than a change of direction.
As a proportion, it seems we're paying quite a lot. It seems like there was a worldwide commitment to spend 78 billion, of which we're committed to spend about 11, which by very rough maths is about a seventh, right? That would suggest that pro rata we are about a seventh of the world economy, which we absolutely are not.
Right, and the problem with this story is this is a Tory government who is spending money on climate change that I'm quite sure, maybe 20, 30, 40% of Tories out there think that the climate is a climate scam, that they don't believe in it. So this is one of the most irritating. First of all, I don't believe in it. I think it's complete.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there is the argument. I certainly think there is an argument that the parliamentary parties are far more committed. I mean, we know for a fact that the Parliamentary Conservative Party is to the left of the Labour membership in this country. I mean, that's one of the weird, incoherent things on all sorts of social issues, and I would imagine climate change is certainly one of them. But it does also seem that with the extraordinary amount of pain everyone is already feeling due to a commitment to green energy and net zero policies, on top of COVID, on top of the Ukraine war, on top of all the other pressures that are on people, this is actually not going to be an unpopular policy to walk away from.
It shouldn't be that we have to carry the burden and we pay for it. I'm all for putting some funding in so that we invent stuff and lead the way. We could make an absolute mint on that.
That is exactly what I feel about it. It should be Silicon Fen that this should be all about,
I think
just chucking money into the pit.
We spending any amount of our time worrying about the.
But if we develop the technologies that the world has agreed are necessary, even if they're not necessary, then they will still make profit.
Even if it's snake oil, if we make them best snake oil, we'll do well.
We'll have to come back to this when we get onto the Toyota story later. We move on to the Express in the meantime, Steve.
Cheaper food on way as price war finally hots up. This whole thing reads like 4 supermarkets have sent a press release and bought some advertising space. They're finally bringing the
They've even got the
down.
princess to dress like a cucumber.
It makes me want to eat it. Although with the purple in the top corner, this is a bit of a Batman villain.
It might be enough in a mint, possibly.
Possibly. But so half of this, they say inflation's coming down. Yeah, part of the inflation was because you were increasing prices at your supermarkets. That greedflation that we talked about.
Well, I don't know. We talked about that last night. I think supermarkets are always greedy. So if they can raise prices at any given moment, they always would have done so. So there must be a reason why they couldn't get away with it.
Every business.
It does mean that I don't want to give them credit for reversing that. If someone mugs you and hands you a tenner back, you don't have to be all.
But they are saying that on the one hand it says inflation is down. Well, that still would suggest there's inflation, and then they're saying prices are starting to fall, which is actually deflation, only back to it. But that would be very welcome. I don't care if that is a press release, if that's happening. But the problem that I suspect is tied in with this, is you won't have escaped your notice, I'm sure, and in Hove, which is a relatively affluent area where we live, There have been empty supermarket shelves. There are certainly signs of shortages, and that's only going to keep prices up, right? If you're down to your last quarter pounders, you
well, we don't know. And according to this article, it says nothing about how wholesaler prices have gone down. It just seems like they've just decided to raise prices and lower prices.
They're doing this today because 2 days ago the front page was saying supermarkets ripped us all off with petrol.
Right.
And so now this turns up so that maybe we forget about the petrol rip-off.
Well, that's possible. We'll have to watch this space.
I agree with Steve.
We finished this section with a mirror, Lewis.
Oh, this is a tragic story, and I'm going to try to handle this as nicely as possible. It's time to tell people I have Alzheimer's. Fiona Phillips, who's a big star, I'm not that familiar with her, but she's only 62 years old.
That is sad.
And it is really sad, but I think it has to be said that, in my view, and you will question me because you are the science and you're also Mr. Science, Simon, but I don't think that that Alzheimer's is necessarily a death sentence or is irreversible. I think it can be treated by eliminating seed oils, by a low-carb diet, and by increasing animal fat in her diet. And that's the problem is that I haven't checked it, but most likely she's probably on a very high-carb, plant-based diet, possibly even a vegetarian or a vegan diet.
So do you have any... I mean, I am aware that, you've done some reading on diet, and this isn't just all like a conspiracy claptrap, but do you have any... have there been any links demonstrated between seed oils and Alzheimer's specifically?
Yes, there is, because this thing about seed oils, it's a toxic chemical, and I think what Alzheimer's is I mean, they're always searching for plaques in the brain, but it has to do with garbage in, garbage out. Our brains are like a huge percentage of cholesterol, and we've been on a knockdown, drag-out thing over the past 60 years to reduce cholesterol.
And bring you in on that, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, this story is... it's a big one for me, because both my parents had Alzheimer's. They passed away in various lockdowns. Indeed, my Edinburgh show this year is all about my relationship with Alzheimer's.
Right.
And I like the fact that people are coming forward and talking about it more, because it's always been the kind of topic that would ruin a dinner party.
Yeah.
You mention Alzheimer's, people clam up, but we need to talk more about it, because more people will end up having it. I agreed with the first half of the thing that you said there, that it's not a death sentence. But as more of the body gets fixed in other ways, what's mathematically left over?
Yes.
At the moment, dementia-related conditions. So more people are going to get it, more people are going to be related to people with it. We need to talk about it.
But that is, of course, people in much later life than 62. It does seem like she has probably a genetic predisposition, but I am not ruling out the possibility of diet. So I think it's always worth investigating the possibility you can improve your chances. That is it for part one. Join us after the break for class war, banking wars and wars of independence. It is, after all, the 4th of July. See you in a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. I am Simon Evans. Tonight I'm joined by Stephen Allen and Lewis Schaefer. Let us crack on with the stories. We go into the papers now, Steve. In-house business first. Apologies to our viewers while we get our domestic situation sorted out. But The Guardian has the latest on Nigel Farage.
It's the update is Nigel Farage's Coutts bank account closed due to lack of funds. Now I can relate.
Yeah.
So it says,
and yet not.
Yeah, well, when you get down to the figures, the bank requires that you have £1 million invested or £3 million in savings.
Yeah.
The terms and conditions are on their website, which is fair enough. And then it's claimed that Nigel was offered a NatWest account. I mean, I do actually have one of those, so humble brag. But Nigel said in an interview on the BBC, at no point in the last 10 years did Coutts give me a minimum threshold. Probably guessing that's how it went.
Yeah.
But it was on the website, to be fair. Then he says, more importantly, the offer of an NatWest personal account only came last Thursday. I think that may be an interesting fact, but it's not more importantly. The more important thing is the accusation that this was about political bias still needs to be proved.
Yeah.
They originally didn't say what the reason was. He filled in that blank with his opinion, but that's not been disproved by them saying it's all to do with the amount of money. Tell us how much money you have. If there were over 3 million in there, you'd have a really strong...
Or, if not, is it something that they fudge for some years, because he claims that he's got as much in there as he's had for ages.
Yeah.
Which, if that isn't 3 million in savings or 1 million in investment, might mean that they were turning a blind eye and now they've decided to play it by the rules. And that is in itself a way in which a certain amount of pressure can be brought to bear. I'm not saying it's, it's not illegal. It's not even necessarily worth the government looking into. But this is important to get to the bottom of, because this kind of thing does seem to be happening. We do know for a fact that, for instance, our friends at Trigonometry had their bank account closed. That definitely happened. That wasn't like Coutts or anything. We know for a fact that the political blogger Wings Over Scotland has been absolutely isolated and persecuted. So it's really important. This is the most high-profile example, and it's important to get it sorted.
It's almost, if you take this one out, then we can definitely focus on the issue of opinions shouldn't preclude you from a bank account.
What do you say?
Well, were they... I mean, did Coutts just call him up, and say, hey, listen, you got to put some more money in the bank?
Well, that would be the first thing, wouldn't it?
That would be the first thing.
Yeah.
That would be the first thing. This thing stinks. Maybe Steve doesn't think that it stinks because Steve's left a wing and it would never happen to him. But the people out there, it could happen to. And the people like me, I think it could happen to me. They could just change. They should have. Coutts could have made a phone call a week before, a month before, say, hey, we've noticed it. We have these rules. Can we help you? And then can we, if you can't get enough money, we do this with everybody.
And, of course, if they have that phone call logged, then they will be able to demonstrate it. But, funnily enough, I was with NatWest. I've mentioned this a couple of nights ago, sort of tongue-in-cheek, but it's true. I was with NatWest in about 1992, something like that, and they just closed my account without any warning because it had been permanently about 50 quid overdrawn. I was sort of on benefits and would have the occasional bit of freelance work. I was trying to get started as a freelance journalist. And they just sent me a letter one day saying, do you know what, we're bored of you. Foodling, But I hadn't broken any rules. I was just slightly overdrawn. I might have bounced the odd cheque in rent or something, And I do remember thinking it was quite... I mean, it kind of hits you in the solar plexus a little bit. I was about 26, 27 at that point. I went and got an account in the Abbey National, which has since gone on to be Santander, and a bigger, more high-prestigious bank than NatWest. But
couldn't they have called you, Steve? I mean, it's
yeah, well, they could have done. But all I'm saying is, it does feel a bit like you're being unpersoned. It is an unpleasant experience. Anyway, speaking of unspeakable levels of personal wealth, the Independent want to know if having a wealthy Prime Minister in a time of pestilence, famine and war is bad optics.
Well, it might be bad optics, but we need to know what the optics are. According to the Independent, bringing up Sunak's wealth is, quote, class warfare, end quote, says Tory minister who claims food bank use is a personal decision. Okay, let's just stick with the one thing, which is, should we know that Sunak has money? We should know. We should know what businesses he's in and what businesses his decisions are affected. We should know. We should know everything about it. And unfortunately, in this country, which is, and this is July 4th, this is American Independence Day, this is a great country. The greatest thing about this country is that it created America, which is the greatest country. But we never know anything about what's going on with our political leaders.
I mean, obviously, most Tory MPs, and in particular Prime Ministers, over the years have usually had quite a lot of significant contact with significant wealth. And Sunak is unusually wealthy. His family is as well.
We should know. We didn't know about Boris Johnson, we still don't know how many kids the guy has. And that's an important issue. With Tony Blair, we didn't know whether he was, whether he supported, whether he was giving his own kids the vaccine back in the day, right? That he, and that he was recommending it. I think we need to know. I didn't know. I don't even know where my counselors live.
What do you think, Steve? Do you think it matters to people?
It's not just about whether it matters. It's also that this Johnny Mercer calls it class warfare. Oh, the poor billionaires having a bit of focus. I would play my smallest little violin, but it's not a Stradivarius. You wouldn't like the sound. It does matter because. If the reason the excuse for delving into whether a Prime Minister or a politician has had an affair is in case they're voting on some sort of family matters issue, it might be germane. Well, if you've got a lot of money and we're having an economic issue, decisions you make, it will inform your decision, so it's right to focus.
I mean, I think for a long time now there's been a good argument that we should pay politicians a lot more and then demand they give up their exterior financial interests, at least for the term that they're in office, possibly with the opportunity to buy back at some point or whatever. But obviously that makes it difficult. You want people who have some experience of the real world, but...
Or at least know what's going on.
I will also say I'm no fan of Johnny Mercer because he was the first to throw Roger Scruton under the bus when the New Statesman did a hit job on him in an interview. So he's proven himself to be unsound as far as I'm concerned, and I think it's very ill-advised to claim that people only use food banks for sort of vaguely cosmetic purposes.
Can I put in a word that the Independent is no longer a newspaper and should not be included in these headlines?
Well, I tend to agree with you. On the other hand, this channel itself has come under scrutiny of that kind of time, so we have to be careful.
But I'm not saying it shouldn't exist, but I think if we're gonna use a website, which is basically what the Independent is, then maybe we should go to Nick Dixon's Daily Skeptic.
I don't know whether it was here or whether it might be another story that we come to later where the Independent had, hyperlinks in the actual story, which you could click on and it would take you to proof to demonstrate what they were talking about. And one of them took you to Jacobin, which is literally a Marxist online. I mean, quite a well-respected Mark, but it is a Marxist newspaper, with a Marxist agenda. So odd. Yeah. Steve, former Firebrand News now, according to the Metro, one of the youngest MPs of my lifetime, and I really am very old, so bear that in mind. She's stepping down and backwards and northwards.
Yeah, for the youngest MP for 350 years, so we know you're less than 350 years old. Murray Black is stepping down. Kids these days, no stamina. So she's...
What's she done, 8 years?
And she's worked it out this way, though. She says she's dedicated a third of her life to Westminster, which is, true, but as a fraction, the denominator's small. Like my kid's 1.5. He's dedicated a third of his life to crying for a boob.
Lives are kind of logarithmic when you're young, aren't they? It starts to unwind pretty quickly. She'll realise she spent the second third of her life dedicated to not very much at all, probably.
Just reading emails and stuff.
Yeah.
So part of this story almost is set up to look like it's about stamina, but the claims ring true. In a tweet, she said that I've maintained how outdated, sexist and toxic a place Westminster is. Very possibly.
Well, I don't know. I find the word toxic... I do use it occasionally, but it's a weasel word, isn't it? It has no real meaning. It just means it made her feel ill. I mean, my kids would probably regard my car as toxic when they were young. I think she's complaining about a sort of culture of hard work, long hours, and perhaps, not quite as many restrooms, breakout opportunities and so on as you might get in a modern sort of Silicon Valley establishment. But it is Parliament, it's not a normal workplace.
She's 28 years old. She's been in Glastonbury. How was she complaining about the restrooms?
That's true.
At the end of the day, she sees the writing on the wall. The writing on the wall is the SNP is possibly. I'm not an expert in that whatever that is.
Hanging by a thread.
Yeah, they're hanging by a thread. She sees it's the same way all the Tories are jumping ship, and the SNP people are jumping.
Well,
ship.
that at least is going to keep the ship balanced, because there'll be Tories jumping off one side and SNP off the other. So yeah.
No, it's not, because Labour is going to win this seat, and that's going to make it easier for Labour.
It is interesting, isn't it, the law of unintended consequences in this regard, because the SNP you would think have been a thorn in the side of the right and the establishment, and Westminster, and obviously complaining about their attempts to block self-ID.
Yeah.
But Westminster, Tory parties absolutely benefited enormously from the SNP, and the fact that Labour voters might actually be afraid of even voting for Labour in England if they are afraid that they might go into coalition. So, yeah, I mean, this is the worst possible outcome in a way for Sunak, right? The end of the SNP. Yeah. Lewis, over to the Telegraph. The latest amendment to this show's least favourite bit of legislation, the online safety bill.
Well, this is misogynistic abuse to be banned online to reduce harm to women and girls, according to the Telegraph.
Yeah.
And this is actually one of the most horrific things. Is like, here we're under the cosh of Ofcom. We're basically controlled. And they say, okay, good reason, because we're the public airways. Anybody could turn in on this.
Yeah.
But this is online, which is basically private communications, or people don't have to find anything. They don't anyway. So that it's that if people say things that make girls and women cry, that the companies might be fined 10% of their global turnover, which is enough to kill a company. And this is we're a small.
Yeah, it could be their margin. Ed, you're right.
It could be their margin. And one more thing, Simon, is like, what would abusive things get sent in the mail too, in the post? Should they fine the Royal Mail?
Well, it's got the King's head on the stamp.
Yeah.
Should they go to him? Yeah, I know what you mean.
I suppose that's a comparison more to do with WhatsApp. The way of sending a message. The argument about some platforms like Twitter is that you are technically a broadcast platform. Not that I'm saying I particularly agree with it.
It's all changed.
Well,
I mean, none of these things map perfectly onto previous things, do they? Some people say Twitter is the town square, it's the default open environment where everyone should be allowed to speak freely. Other people say you're a publisher, some people say no. We just have to try and work out what's the best legislation to try and make everyone happy. But I do feel...
No legislation.
Well, I do feel at the moment there's a general drift towards a sort of authoritarian attitude.
Let's just say, I'm pointing to myself, no legislation.
OK.
Yeah, because you do well.
Terrible case today. South Yorkshire police whooping it up because they managed to give somebody 18 months in jail for abusive social media messages, which, I mean, maybe they were that bad. Crime news now. This is our last story of the segment. We'll have to keep it short. In the Times, Steve, we have the rights and wrongs of fraud. I've got to say, I like these odds, certainly.
Only 1 in 3,000 chance of going to prison if you do a bit of fraud, so that's your weekend sorted.
Yeah.
But what happened with fraud is this. So the government wanted to be able to say we're tough on crime because that's how people vote for it, but it turns out they didn't do particularly well. Then they found a way of talking about crime figures. And you can say that in the last 10 years, the crime figures have halved because they stopped counting fraud. And fraud accounted during that period for about half of crime.
Right.
So literally, they fudged it by going, let's just not count half and say it's dropped by half.
Right.
That means we've now ignored fraud to such an extent that in the past decade, it was around 400,000 cases. In the last year, we've got 3.7 million. That's how much it's increased. We are at such risk of being done in a fraud, an online fraud, and yet, the odds are good for avoiding prison.
And is that partly because they would rather find people because fraudsters are generally not physically dangerous? I suppose that might be an argument for not sending them to jail.
Well, but then the flip side, what you just said about sending tweeters to jail.
Yeah, absolutely true. That's it for part 2. Coming up, we'll have online harms, unharmed arms and dad's armies. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
And welcome back to Headliners. So we'll kick off with the Daily Mail in this section. Lewis, this puts our online harms bill in perspective.
Yes, Michigan, it's on the same theme. Daily Mail, Michigan residents could be charged with a felony, face up to 5 years in prison and get a £10,000 fine just for using the wrong pronouns under unconstitutional new bill. Unconstitutional means it violates the American First Amendment.
Yeah.
Michigan. So basically, this is in Michigan, which is like that. In America, they always go like that. They say, "Where in Michigan are you from?" And they always point their finger like that, right?
Right.
And
is it on the lakes?
Yeah, it's like over there, over here. They're always pointing. And I have a joke, which I started this as, and then I remembered I can't do this joke on TV.
Well, go and see Lewis live for the rest of that
And
show.
you'll see amazing.
Are they generally regarded as a state where this kind of authoritarian overreach has been coming for some time, though?
No.
Oh.
Basically, it's a state like many states in America, which has like a rural area where people are very conservative and an inner city area like Detroit or Flint.
Although Detroit became rural again, didn't it? But
yes,
it's back on the way up again.
It's coming back. Thank God. And they basically trashed it. So it's a state like New York, which is like that, or Pennsylvania or Virginia. They're like that. And they're basically saying they say what constitutes being intimidated or harassed would be up to the interpretation of the listener and the local press.
And I mean, just to make it clear on this pronouns thing, the only way in which the wrong pronouns will be used offensively is correctly, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like in traditional terms. So I would say, Lewis is a great broadcaster. He absolutely gets my vote. And you would go, I now identify. If I was to say Lewis is a great broadcaster, she really gets my vote, and you're like, that's just I'm calling you gay or something. That would, do you know what I mean? That wouldn't be the offence, right? I'm correct on this, right? That wouldn't be offensive. That if I was to use theatrical slang,
I stopped listening. I stopped listening because I don't trust you, Si. Who knows what you're always saying with your small little words.
Well, I mean, I suppose technically that would also because what the thing that's illegal is the harassment. They've just included the new classifications in the ways in which you can harass to include sexual identity, gender, whatever the words would be. It's
drawing attention to biological sex.
Yeah, but then it's more about the fact if you repeat something to make it offensive. I like to compare it to the word ginger. They've not banned the word ginger, but you could definitely use it in a way that you are harassing someone. So they're focusing on the wrong thing. You shouldn't have compelled speech. You shouldn't focus on what the pronouns are.
In the same way that Elon Musk said that cis could be used as an harassment term. If you continually refer to somebody as cis, by which we mean, of course, if you don't know, you have your gender is aligned with your sex.
And the same thing with I did a poll on Twitter, which 75% of the people who follow me, at least, felt that that the word gammon.
Yeah, it's racist. It's definitely racist. Anyway, Daily Mail now, Steve, a little victory over the vaccine Nazis.
Wheelchair tennis exec wins £27,000 payout from sports governing body after she was sacked for refusing to comply with hardline COVID policy. So this Sarah Sinan hadn't had her jabs. At the time, there was no legal requirement to do so, and then the International Tennis Federation thought, well, we'll bring on our own rules, thank you very much. Who'd have thought they had their own racket? And she then successfully sued because it was going too far. At a time when the actual restrictions of the country were going down, they wanted to do it performatively.
And she wasn't working in a care home or somewhere where you could legitimately say you need to be jabbed, or at least they felt that you needed to be jabbed. I mean, obviously, Lewis won't accept that anyone should be jabbed, but even within the context of the understanding of the nation of...
No, it made it more like the travel was slightly trickier. But even then, when there was a flight that she couldn't take, someone else went instead and took with them a freelance cameraman who wasn't vaccinated.
Go on, Lewis.
I mean, this is... Why I'm going to take a different point on this. Okay. Why shouldn't a company fire people, whoever they want to fire, for whatever reason they want to fire, without the government intervention? Yes, I am unvaxxed. I'm totally against forcing people to vax. But if you work for a company that wants you to vax, and you don't vax, they should fire you. But at the same time, we should never do business with companies like that.
Fair enough. That seems like a workable solution. Cultural studies in The Guardian, Lewis, a fellow Schaefer here, who has made what seems to me to be a pretty blindingly obvious observation.
Oh, my God.
About LOLO and Brexit.
Yeah, this was according to historian Gavin Schaefer.
No relation, as far as you know.
No relation. I mean, I don't even know if he's pronounced Gavin Schaefer, but I'm going to pronounce it that way.
Gavin Schaefer?
And when I actually read the article, according to the voice activation software, they pronounced it my name, Schaefer, which no one has ever really done. Anyway, I'm a Schaefer, Lewis Schaefer. You can Google me. I mean, Twitter. Twitter me.
Come on.
What are we here for again?
Sorry about that. Sorry. But it basically says that sitcoms reveal culture that contributed to Brexit votes, says historian. They're basically saying that these sitcoms perhaps influenced the Brexit thing, rather than the fact that these sitcoms were in an era which was different than this. And a lot of British people don't like Europe. And
it's true, though, but those sitcoms, the ones they mentioned, LOLO and Dad's Army in particular, and 40 Towers, I thought that was a bit off-beam, but those first two, they were massive in the 60s and 70s. They were nostalgic, they were looking back to the war, maybe LOLO made it into the 90s. It was certainly all over by the turn of the century. And there was no suggestion we were going to have Brexit in 1994 when LOLO was at its height, or indeed Only Fools and Horses. So, I mean, it's tenuous, I think, don't you?
Oh, yeah, and Dad's Army was before the 1970s vote,
so
that goes the other way.
Yeah.
And they missed the point with Fawlty Towers, the famous clip that they talk about in some of the articles, I didn't vote for it myself, but now we're in, I want to make the best of it. We're laughing at Basil in We're not, that's not taking the temperature of the nation.
He does swing back and forth. He is generally a figure that you realise is out of his depth, he's a little snob, desperately trying to social climb and so on. But on the other hand, he occasionally says things that and perhaps, the waiter from Barcelona is.
in that episode, he's sustained a head injury by this stage.
Yes, that is true. Yes, you did. You invaded Poland.
But at the end of the day, what this article and what this guy is trying to look for is an explanation of why the people voted for Brexit, because he has such disrespect for people who voted for Brexit. He thinks they're insane. He can't imagine the people, I didn't vote for Brexit, I can't vote, period.
But there's always been, he is correct in saying there has always been a very particular attitude to Europe, even among people who are well, there was a kind of new breed of very pro-Europe, but we have always felt we don't hate Europe, but we are slightly adjacent to it. We're just slightly off to one side.
But even in Europe,
it was workable.
Even in Europe, they're slightly adjacent. The French are not in love with the Germans. The Germans aren't in love with the Italians. It's like they're all separate countries. Of course, Britain is not in love with Europe.
Most of the countries in the EU, I think, felt tethered to German economic might. In a way that Britain just didn't like it at all. No, anyway, we can't get into solving Brexit. Staying with The Guardian now, see, potentially good news here, if not giddily optimistic, in fact.
Yeah, Toyota claims a battery breakthrough in potential boost for electric cars. The Japanese firm believes it could make solid-state batteries with a range of 745 miles that charge in just 10 minutes. With that technology, you can make Apple phones usable. and they say it's a technological breakthrough. It will improve the weight and the charging speed is an important one. They don't go into details of how this solid state works, because otherwise I would have made one.
Or how many 4-year-old Congo children are required to be plummeted into wells to get the stuff.
I do think people seem to have an issue with electric cars because they are linked to eco-ness. Whereas when we were growing up, you watched the Jetsons, I just presumed the future had electric cars.
I'm all up for it, but I mean, I live in Brighton and Hove. I've said this before. The charging facilities are absolutely laughable. You might as well literally try and own your own dirigible or something for the available masts that they have. They've got to create the opportunity to actually use them. And that's got to be ramped up. So maybe this will do it.
No, this is one of those stories. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, whatever. The word is could. Japanese firm believes it could. I could too. I'm just telling you that I could make a solid-state battery that's going to last twice.
It's a nice bit of PR for Toyota, at least. Suspicious substance now, Lewis, in the Metro, and it sounds like the White House have an almost irrational fear of the stuff.
Yes, and they should have irrational fear because it's tied to this is a much deeper story. It's a suspicious substance found in White House confirmed to be cocaine, and they tested. This is a couple of days ago. They tested it, and then they found cocaine in the White House. But I guarantee you, if you tested everywhere, you could find cocaine.
They say 80% of British banknotes, right? When they used to be paper, anyway.
People used to roll them up, and the truth is that it wasn't anthrax, so they didn't need to close the place down. And secondly, the most important thing was that Hunter. This was basically an attempt to degrade the power of Joe Biden because the Democrats want him gone because he's so useless. And even the Democrats feel this. So
he's also been mean to Ben Wallace as well, so I'm really against him now. He wants Ursula von der Leyen to be the head of NATO instead of Ben. Bad. Out with Biden. I can't believe it. I think cocaine feels like quite a quaint, old-fashioned drug to find in the White House now. I mean, all these bankers are all on ADHD meds, aren't they? It feels like cocaine's quite old school.
I'm impressed that the newspaper took quite a few paragraphs before it suddenly started shouting about Hunter Biden. But compare and contrast it. There was a thing, I can't remember how many years ago, but they did some swabs around the House of Commons, and there was cocaine residue everywhere. 4 out of the 9 places they tested, and I'm presuming that's not like 4 of those places were Michael Gove's office. Admitted that. We're allowed to say that, aren't we?
Well, we can say this, that at the Anti-Cocaine World Conference, they found cocaine.
It probably does get just about everywhere, but it doesn't necessarily. I mean, it's obviously illegal, and I'm not kind of like overly trivialising it, but it's not like a drug that's going to make anyone go crazy. I mean, it's always been used in the higher echelons to give people. Half of World War II was fought on amphetamines, right? They're like, people work late hours.
No, you should take that back because according to Hunter Biden's desktop, whatever laptop, he went crazy. Went 172 miles down a highway.
Oh, yeah, no, he goes crazy. Donald Trump had it right. He had the Diet Coke. That's the stuff you want. Anyway, that's all for part 3. Coming up in the final section, we've got N-word apologies, legacy anomalies, and eugenic policies. See you in a couple of minutes.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess I've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant the Big Green, my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners for our final segment. Independent now, Stephen, a word in a government document that is being described as an N-word, though it isn't the N-word, is it?
It's close.
Is it?
It's, yeah. So Rishi Sinak condemns N-word slur found in official DWP document.
DWP, are those all slurs as well?
Yeah. Beep, beep, and beep face. So the Independent did some research on this and found this document that referred to black people as being of the... It begins with an N, some stars, ends in a D.
It's the one that ends in the word roid, isn't it? It's the one that means... It's an old-fashioned...
to describe something that's...
Or anthropoid. I'm funnily enough listening to... sorry, this keeps popping up. I'm listening to... audible book of the original Edgar Rice Burroughs Tarzan stories at the moment, and they frequently refer to the gorillas, but whom he's being raised by, as anthropoid, which means man-shaped. Yeah. They are man-shaped animals. The word oid, like cuboid, spheroid, and so on, means shaped of a shape. So it is a technically scientific word, but it's one which is dated. Well, it's not a slur in that sense. It was a word used in scientific literature.
But this is not like this document was written ages ago and, and quotes the dog from
I'm not saying
Dambusters.
it's appropriate. I'm just saying it was never a slur. It wasn't put there in a derogatory way, in the same way they would say Caucasian or Occidental or, there are various other words that have sort of become less palatable to people.
An adjective, I suppose, is what we've got there.
But it was written in scientific origin.
It was written in 2010, though, and even then I think it would have... would have seemed out of place.
Yeah.
What I like about 2010 is it's just not quite long enough ago to be able to blame the previous Labour government. I bet they checked.
The other thing is that comes into it, though, which I am genuinely having sort of defended, is I cannot imagine the context in which it's relevant, because it's sort of talking almost about a sort of, I don't know, like a shape. Do you know what I mean? And that's not a thing, is it?
It's a document that refers specifically to osteoporosis. How can you mention skin colour when you're definitely dealing with bones?
OK.
Well, let's point out that this incident took place in Northern Ireland. And I love those people, but they're a little bit weird about stuff like that.
So you're definitely going to get there. You're going to take all of the heat that was coming my way. Thank you for that. Crossing the pond now to your home country, if you're not alma mater. Lewis, this is Harvard, I think, and the Mail say legacy admissions are next in the crosshairs.
Well, it's interesting because I'm a Harvard graduate and a doctor of virology. I identify. Activist lawyers demand Harvard ends legacy admissions as they argue that they unfairly favor white students. Just days after SCOTUS ended affirmative action, and legacy admissions is if your parents went to Harvard, then as a kid you get to go to Harvard.
And especially if there's a gym named after them or a rowing team or something.
And that's what they used to do. And it's basically 40% of all the students are basically legacy to Harvard. So it gives a and they're all 70% of them are white, of course.
It's not. How many did you say?
It says, according to the 70% of all legacy applicants are white.
Yeah, but how many of all applicants are legacy? Not very many, I don't think. I think it's sort of 8 or 10% or something like that. I don't think it's
they said they only have 4.5%.
Right, OK, yeah.
No, 28% of the class were legacies.
Really?
Yes, 28%.
Wow, OK,
That's
is
a
big deal then.
But can I point out the most important thing? Is that Harvard is a private institution. And the only reason they're making a big deal about this is because it takes government money. Yeah. And because the government passes out money, they think they can tell people what to do. It's about time that schools stop taking government money and let them do it, and they just let them do what they want to do.
I would, again, vote for that. We're on the same team on that one. Again, over to The Independent now, Steve. Never mind Mars. Elon Musk offers more tantalising hints that he is ready to repopulate Earth.
Elon Musk supports eliminating voting rights for people without children. Does he, or is he winding people up? Let's read on. Over the weekend, Elon Musk appeared on Twitter, so already it looks like that's the place you go to troll people.
Yeah.
And it's because he replied to a tweet with the word yup.
Yeah.
It's not the most committal I've ever seen anyone
This is
tweet.
exactly how Nazi Germany started.
And the next thing
Alfred Rosenberg, yep. Well, I mean, I think it is quite interesting because he has spoken in the past, and this is the one that The Independent linked to Jacobin on. He has spoken in the past on the idea that smart people are not having so many kids. And this is the thing, people have written whole books about this, that there is a tendency nowadays for smart men to marry smart women. They both want to have long careers. They both maybe try and sneak one in before last orders, but they don't have large families like they used to anymore. And the idea is IQ hereditary, or is it just a roll of the dice? Well, there's a certain amount of evidence to suggest that smart families have smart kids, and we could use some of those. And he's in favour of that.
I don't think that's what he's talking about, because he has said many times, he has said that the biggest problem is depopulation, is the rate of population is going down, and we're not going to have enough people to pay Louis Schaefer's double pension. And so he just wants more people.
On this, though, he did once say that not having enough people could be the biggest problem that humanity faces. He's also said the biggest threat that humanity faces is AI and not having a spare planet to go to.
Yeah, so well, he's got a range. Anything from the top shelf. We've got 1 minute to do ambergris, Lewis. A disgusting 9-kilogram lump of flammable wax found lodged in a dead whale is worth a cool $500,000.
Well, whales should not be eating shrimp and
it's like steak. Gout for them, right? Isn't it? Yeah.
It's like they shouldn't, just as we humans should not be eating carbohydrates, we shouldn't be eating plant material, and some plant eaters should not be eating meat. And that's what this is.
But the upside of it is that it creates ambergris, which is an amazing substance for perfume use.
Have you ever smelled it, Simon?
It actually is not that smelly. Apparently what it does, it carries, it allows perfume, good perfume, to linger longer.
Well,
that's what it does.
You might have some ambergris building up in you, though, by the sounds of it, because it caused a problem for this one. The pathologist who went down there thought there might be something wrong with his stomach, so he said, I went to look at the animal's colon. It's a bit too soon, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe check the mouth first. He's a bit keen.
But he's got $500,000, 9 kilograms. Now, I mean, that's probably more than worth its weight in gold, right? 9 kilograms? I don't know. It must be getting on for it. Anyway, the show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. The Daily Mail. Boris, Partygate accuser, faces faces his own police probe. The Guardian, UK ready to drop £11.6 billion pledge for climate fund. Financial Times, the Bank of England considers forcing foreign banks to replace branches with subsidiaries. The Daily Express say that cheaper food is on the way as price war finally hots up. The Mirror have the sad news from Fiona Phillips that she has Alzheimer's. The Daily Star, I shall say this only once. Allo caused Brexit. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Stephen Allen and Lewis Schaefer. We're back tomorrow at 11 p.m, where Steve will be joined by Leo Kearse and Diane Spencer. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you. Good night.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens.